Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the Roadmaster InvisiBrake supplemental braking system on a 2022 Chevrolet Spark. Now your braking system is going to allow the vehicle to slow and stop as the RV goes down the road, but also you're going to have a breakaway switch here, and that way if the car does become detached from all of your tow bar and safety cables, it's going to pull our cable, and that's going to allow those brakes to apply on the vehicle and then bring it to a stop. Now the InvisiBrake is pretty nice because your box will be mounted inside, allowing you to adjust the pressure on the cylinder, and the rest of the cylinder lives up to the name InvisiBrake, so it actually hides kind of in the floorboard, and it does make for a little bit trickier of an install, but overall it looks really clean once it's installed. So we're going to head into the shop and I'll show you how I routed mine and kind of where we mounted everything up. Now there's going to be 5 main components required for flat towing a vehicle, and the first one we're going to start on the vehicle side is going to be the base plate, and the base plate attaches to the front of the vehicle, normally to the frame or the bumper beam, and that creates a solid mounting point, and it also creates attachment points for the rest of them. Now with your base plate, this one here with our Roadmaster, we have our arms, and these actually come out when not in use, but these create the connection point to our tow bar, which is our second component, which connects the towed vehicle with the hitch of the RV. Now the next thing moving along from the base plate is our safety chain loops. So our Nighthawk here actually has the nice integrated safety cables, but this is going to, in case of accidental disconnect, this is just going to add a secondary safety to make sure that it's holding on. Also, if this comes out, you should have them crossed, and that's going to keep that tow bar from just dragging along the road. Next, you'll have your supplemental braking system, and right here we have our breakaway cable. So in case all of these fail, it's going to pull this cable, and that's going to put the brakes on the towed vehicle, bringing it to a stop. That way it's not rolling down the highway. But also with that braking system, as you slow and stop with your RV, it's going to transmit that to the brake pedal on the vehicle, and that's just going to make it less harsh on the RV. It's not going to be pushing you around, and overall it's just going to be a safer drive. Now it is required in most states, but a vehicle like this might fall under that category of weight to not need one, so something you might want to look into. Next, you're also going to have diode wiring, and this is our light signals transmitted to the taillights of the vehicle from the RV. So you have your 7-pole on your RV, and through the umbilical that'll transmit our signals here to the taillights, and you tie into those using diodes, which will protect your taillights but also give you your running lights, your turn signals, as well as your brake lights. Now for the installation of the InvisiBrake, it's a lot easier to have the seat removed because you're going to be hiding the piston as well as the cable routing underneath the carpet. So to take this out, pretty easy. It's going to be some T45 Torx bits, so just 4 of them should take the seat out, and you'll be thanking yourself just to have that extra space. So we'll start here at where the InvisiBrake module is. This is where you're going to adjust your air pressure, and you can self-tap this into your floor, but really the best way I've found sometimes is just putting some hook and loop here underneath, and that way it's going to stick to either the floorboard or even the mat, and it's just going to make it to where you're not having to drill that into your floor. It's not going to move. It's relatively heavy, and plus with the hook and loop that should keep it in place. Now there are quite a few connections coming out of here, so a total of 4. We have our small little air line here that's going to go directly to our cylinder. We also have another thicker airline, 1/4 inch, and this is going to run eventually to our engine bay to tap into our brake booster. We then have 2 plugs here, so this is going to tie on into our diode wiring, and this red and black and white, this is just going to eventually make its way to power. So tracing this, I just went ahead and used a loom clamp and used the factory hardware here on the plugs from our seat, and just tucked our wiring here in the carpet. So as I peel our carpet back, I just ran my wiring over and then through to the passenger side. Now unfortunately this car doesn't have a nice grommet to pass through, so if you don't want to go through the passenger side, I ended up drilling about an inch hole with a step bit to pass everything through. The other option, you could probably use these plastic grommets here underneath, but just make sure you seal them up really well if you do that path. Now The wiring will run over there and we'll kind of go through that later, but mounting up our cylinder, pretty easy. We have this rubberized loom clamp here, so I just self-tap this in. I also kind of just dug away at some of this sound deadening here to kind of create a little bit more space. I then ran our small airline tube to our cylinder. And with the push connect fitting, you just want to make sure that it kind of snaps in, and it should have tension to where you can't pull it out. If you ever have to remove it, you're going to push in on that, and then you should be able to pull tension, and then that'll pull out. Now, routing the rest of the cable, you want to make sure that if you're going to make some loops, that you're not going to have hard turns. And so keeping the turns in a small radius, or a large radius I should say, that way that cable can still work. You're going to mount that up using these clamps, just self-tap them in, and then make your way up to where we have our pulley. Now with our bracket here, you want a little bit of play. You can see the ball at the top. And that way it's not pulling tension on the pedal. I then just tighten down our clamp and made sure that our angle is looking pretty good here. This just self-taps in, and you can put this at an angle, but you want to make sure that that cable is not going to hold against the bottom here of our fitting and just rolling on the middle portion of our pulley. From there, I just use this little tab here to hold in this cable, and that's pretty much the basics of the braking portion. The rest of the wire, we'll hop over to the passenger side and I show you where I pass that through. Peeling this back, I used a grommet that we had here in the shop and just kind of drilled the hole out. I've passed all of our wires through, and also we had our brake disconnect that we have a button in our interior, so I passed that through there. That seems to be the safest spot that I drilled out just to get all the wires passed through the firewall. So if you can find an easier spot, by all means. There was this drain that I considered, but also with water, I'm just trying to keep that separate. So drilling this out, and I put a little bit of black silicone to fill that up once I had everything passed through. And I also put some wire loom around there just in case any of the metal rubs against it. It's not going to damage the wires. So we'll get the car up on the lift and I'll show you where I routed our wires from there. Now you can see where I made the hole to pass all my wires through, and I just routed them up in a nice little bundle here. Now there is the one power wire here that's got the plug side that goes to our breakaway cable, and it's just a male-female plug, and I routed that over. It's tucked away here, but in this portion I just bundled up. You're gonna have plenty of extra wires, so you can kind of route it on the passenger side or the driver's side, but it just makes its way over to our breakaway cable. You then just plug that in, and this, depending on your base plate, this should bolt up pretty easily, and that just plugs into there. Now I'm going to lower this down and show you where the rest of the wires go. So you can see my wire loom here, and I also have the airline tucked in with that, and that just kind of routes over here. Now the red and black wire, pretty easy. You're going to attach that to a inline fuse holder. Now I always recommend, until you have everything hooked up, keep that fuse out. But this just goes to our positive, and our black wire here I just routed to the negative of the battery. Now we also have our 4 colored wires that match our diode wiring, and those have to tie in. So my diode wiring kind of ran into here, and using a series of heat shrink butt connectors, I got those two joined together, which then ran to our 6-pole here. Now something else that I'll point out is if you are using the indicator light in the RV, you're going to want to use or pick up a brake light switch, and that way you can run that to your 6-pole and it'll light up the indicator light on your RV. Now that's a pretty simple one as well. There's a green wire and a red wire on that. So one goes to power, so that's where I have another ring terminal here, and then the other one, pretty easy. I just extended that and routed it with my diode wiring and attached it to the S on my 6-pole. So pretty simple overall. Again, you're just getting power, you're tying into your diodes, you're plugging in your breakaway switch. Now your airline is what always people kind of get hung up on, because you are tying into your factory brake system, but it's pretty easy. I'll show you. So my airline that we routed all the way with everything, I used this flexible tube to tie into our T. Now to get these in, you're going to want to use a little bit of silicone to kind of help slide it along, and cutting your tubes sometimes are tricky, but using a tubing cutter is really beneficial to get a nice clean cut. And also you're going to be putting a check valve. So this one-way check valve, just make sure that it's not pulling from the engine. So you'll have the black side that should face towards the engine side where it plugs in here, and the white side should be facing towards the booster. So pretty much you just have your one-way check valve closer to the engine, your T so it can pull from the booster line, and then you just attach that right there. So overall, it seems like a lot of wires that you're running, but as long as they go to the homes that they need to be in, it's not too bad. So something, again, I recommend if you're watching our diode wiring video on this, is since you're going to be tying into that when you run your diode wiring, pulling an extra little bit of wire there is going to make it a lot easier to make those connections. Something else I'll point out is you're going to need to run a ground off of that, and there's a factory ground that's tucked down here, and that seemed to work pretty well for all of our grounding needs. So now you can go ahead and pull your breakaway switch, and that's a great way to test to make sure that it's working. And as we pull the switch, you're going to see your brake pedal actuating. And that was a look and installation of the Roadmaster InvisiBrake supplemental braking system on a 2022 Chevrolet Spark.